leaves crunched beneath Derek Broaddus's feet as he stood in the driveway of 657 Boulevard, his heart swelling with a pride he had never felt before. The colonial-style house rose before him like something from a magazine cover, its cream-colored walls warm in the October sunlight, the wraparound porch promising lazy summer evenings and the laughter of children. After years of saving, sacrificing, and dreaming, he and his wife Maria had finally done it. They had bought their piece of the American dream in Westfield, New Jersey, for $1.3 million. The neighborhood embodied everything they had hoped to give their 3 young children. Tree-lined streets where kids could ride bicycles safely, manicured lawns that spoke of community pride, and the kind of suburban peace that seemed increasingly rare in the modern world. Derek could already picture his 10-year-old son throwing a football in the spacious backyard, while his 2 younger daughters would build fairy houses among the oak trees that had stood sentinel for decades. Maria emerged from the house, her dark hair catching the breeze as she smiled at her husband. "The kids are going to love their new rooms," she said, her voice carrying the excitement of new beginnings. "Emma keeps asking when we can paint her walls purple, and the twins want to know if they can have a sleepover on the first night." Derek wrapped his arms around his wife, feeling the weight of their accomplishments settle into his bones. After months of house hunting and years of financial planning, they had finally secured their forever home. The 6-bedroom, 3-bathroom colonial house had been built in 1905, its walls holding over a century of family stories and memories. The real house in Westfield, New Jersey, is a 6-bed, 3-bath shingle-style home for the Westfield Historic Preservation Society, which was built in 1905. For Maria, this purchase held special meaning. She had grown up in Westfield, and returning here with her own family felt like coming full circle. The couple bought the home for $1,355,657. It was more than they had ever spent on anything, but the house called to them with an almost magnetic pull. The previous owners, the Woods family, had lived there for 23 years, raising their own children within these walls. During the closing, everything had seemed perfect. The house inspection passed, the paperwork was flawless, and the Woods family appeared eager to pass the torch to the next generation of homeowners. But Derek and Maria weren't ready to move in immediately. They never officially moved into the house because the family was having minor renovations done beforehand. They spent about $100,000 on renovations, court documents show. They wanted everything to be perfect for their 3 young children, who were much younger than most people realized. The family had specifically requested that their children's ages be kept private to protect them from the media attention that would later engulf their lives. The first few days after the purchase in June 2014 passed in a blur of excitement and planning. Derek would drive by the house on his way to work, sometimes stopping to walk the perimeter and envision the family barbecues they would host, the birthday parties in the spacious backyard, and the quiet evenings they would spend on the wraparound porch. The neighborhood felt safe and welcoming, with tree-lined streets that seemed to whisper promises of suburban tranquility. Then the letters began. The first envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, just 4 days after they had closed on the house. Derek found it tucked into the mailbox during one of his visits to check on the renovation progress. The envelope was unremarkable, white, standard size, with their names written in neat block letters. But something about the precise handwriting made his skin prickle with unease. He tore it open standing there in the driveway, the June sun warming his shoulders as he unfolded the single sheet of paper. The words that greeted him would haunt his dreams for years to come. "Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood. How did you end up here? Did 657 Boulevard call to you with its force within?" Derek's hands trembled as he continued reading. The letter writer identified themselves simply as the Watcher and claimed to have been watching the house for decades. The Watcher said was a fascination for their family for decades. In the letters, said they were put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. But it was the next line that made Derek's blood run cold. The Watcher knew their names, knew they had children, and seemed to know intimate details about their family that should have been impossible for a stranger to possess. Derek drove home in a daze, the letter burning like fire in his jacket pocket. When he walked through the front door of their rental home, Maria immediately noticed his pale complexion and the way his hands shook as he poured himself a glass of water. "What's wrong?" she asked, setting down the children's lunch plates and moving toward him with the intuitive concern that comes from 15 years of marriage. Without speaking, Derek handed her the letter. He watched as her expression shifted from curiosity to confusion to horror. Her face went white as she reached the parts about their children, about young blood, about decades of watching and waiting. "This has to be some kind of sick joke," Maria whispered, but her voice carried no conviction. "Maybe it's from one of our friends, trying to scare us." Derek wanted to believe her. He desperately wanted to dismiss the letter as a prank, a misguided attempt at humor from someone in their social circle. But the tone was too serious, too detailed, too knowing. This wasn't the work of a friend with a twisted sense of humor. This was something else entirely. Over the next few days, they tried to rationalize the letter away. Derek threw himself into the renovation plans, spending long hours at the house supervising contractors and trying to reclaim the sense of joy and accomplishment he had felt just days before. Maria researched the neighborhood online, looking for any history of pranks or local characters who might explain the mysterious correspondence. But their attempts at normalcy shattered when the second letter arrived. This one was longer, more detailed, and infinitely more disturbing. The watcher described watching the family come and go, mentioned specific details about their daily routines that no casual observer could have known, and asked questions that felt like violations of their most private moments. The letter writer seemed to know when Derek left for work, what time Maria picked up groceries, even which child had which bedroom assigned in the new house, information that the family had only discussed in private. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Maria, who had been looking forward to returning to her childhood town, now found herself jumping at every shadow, analyzing every neighbor they passed on the street, wondering if the person behind them in line at the grocery store was the one who had been watching them. Derek began taking different routes to work, constantly checking his rearview mirror, and lying awake at night wondering if someone was outside their current home, observing them even now. The third letter arrived 2 weeks later, and with it came a mention that would haunt Maria's nightmares for years to come. "Do you need to fill the house with young blood like your home was used to?" The phrase young blood appeared multiple times in the correspondence, creating an ominous refrain that seemed to target their most primal fear as parents, the safety of their children. Derek called the Westfield Police Department, but the response was frustratingly limited. The letters, while deeply disturbing, didn't contain explicit threats of violence. The police filed a report and promised to increase patrols in the neighborhood, but there was little else they could do. The watcher was careful, never crossing the legal line from harassment into direct threats, never providing enough evidence to launch a meaningful investigation. Desperate for answers, Derek and Maria reached out to the previous owners, the Woods family. Had they ever received similar letters? Had they ever noticed anyone watching the house? The Woods family seemed genuinely shocked and concerned, claiming they had never experienced anything like what the Broaddus family was enduring. They had lived peacefully at 657 Boulevard for over 2 decades, raising their children without incident. This revelation only deepened the mystery. Why was the watcher targeting them specifically? What had changed that made the house suddenly interesting to this anonymous stalker? The questions multiplied faster than answers, creating a web of paranoia and fear that began to consume their daily lives. Once they started receiving the letters, the family continued to have reservations about moving in, deciding to rent the property until it could be sold. The dream home they had saved for years to purchase became a source of terror instead of joy. The house sat empty while they paid both rent on their temporary home and the mortgage on the property they were afraid to inhabit. Derek installed security cameras around the perimeter of 657 Boulevard, hoping to catch some glimpse of their tormentor. Night after night, he reviewed hours of footage, searching for any sign of movement, any figure lurking in the shadows. But the watcher remained invisible, a ghost who seemed to move through the world without leaving a trace. Meanwhile, the letters continued to arrive with clockwork regularity. Each one revealed more intimate knowledge of the family's life, more details that should have been impossible for an outsider to know. The watcher knew about Maria's morning coffee routine, knew which child struggled with math homework, knew about private conversations the family had had in their car while driving through the neighborhood. The psychological toll became unbearable. Maria began experiencing panic attacks, jolting awake in the middle of the night with the certainty that someone was watching her through the bedroom window. Derek found himself unable to focus at work, constantly checking his phone for calls from home, worried that the watcher had escalated from letters to direct contact. Their children, initially excited about the move and unaware of the growing crisis, began to sense the tension between their parents. Family dinners became strained affairs, with Derek and Maria exchanging worried glances over the children's heads, speaking in code about the house situation and the delays. The final letter arrived in early 2015, and its contents would ultimately drive the family to make a decision that would cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars. "I am pleased to know your names and the names now of the young blood you have brought to me," the watcher wrote, the phrase carrying implications that made Maria physically ill. The letter continued with references to lies within the walls and hints about the house's history that the watcher claimed to know intimately. The tone had shifted from merely creepy to something that felt genuinely sinister, as if the watcher was growing impatient with the family's absence from the property. That night, Derek and Maria sat at their kitchen table and made one of the most difficult decisions of their lives. They would not, move their children into that house. No amount of money, no dream of suburban perfection, was worth the constant fear and violation they had experienced over the past several months. On June 2, 2015, the Broadduses filed a civil lawsuit against the Woodses seeking a full refund of the $1.3 million they paid for the home. In addition to the money they paid for the house back, they also wanted the title to the house, renovation expense reimbursement of hundreds of thousands of dollars, and attorney fees. The legal battle that followed was almost as traumatic as the original stalking. The family's private nightmare became public record, with details of the watcher's letters spread across local and national media. Derek and Maria, who had simply wanted to provide a safe and beautiful home for their children, found themselves at the center of a media circus that only added to their trauma. They even attempted to get permission from the city's planning board to raise the house and divide the property into 2 lots. However, they were denied and put the house on the market. The idea of destroying the house entirely spoke to their desperation. If they couldn't live in it and couldn't sell it, perhaps removing it from existence was the only way to escape the watcher's influence. The house remained on the market for years, its price dropping repeatedly as the story of the watcher became part of its permanent history. 2 months later, on May 14, 2015, the house was still on the market, and the price lowered again to $1.25 million. Every potential buyer who researched the property would discover its dark history, making it nearly impossible to sell at anything approaching its original value. For the Broaddus family, the years that followed were a study in resilience and recovery. They eventually moved to a different area, far from Westfield and the memories of those terrible months. The children, protected by their parents' decision to never move into the house, grew up largely unaware of how close they had come to living under the watcher's gaze. Derek and Maria underwent therapy to deal with the trauma of the experience. The violation they felt, not just of their privacy, but of their fundamental sense of safety and security, took years to heal. They learned to trust again, to feel secure in their new home, to believe that not every stranger on the street might be watching them. One family's nightmare is over. They finally sold the home where they were terrorized by letters from the watcher. The house was eventually sold in 2019 for far less than the family had paid for it, representing a financial loss that paled in comparison to the emotional toll of their experience. The identity of the watcher remains unknown to this day. despite police investigations, media attention, and amateur sleuths who became fascinated by the case, no one has ever been arrested or charged in connection with the letters. The person who terrorized the Broaddus family disappeared as mysteriously as they had appeared, leaving behind only questions and the lingering fear that they might still be out there, watching some other unsuspecting family. The case has become a cautionary tale about the vulnerability that comes with home ownership, about the thin line between public and private life, and about the way a single malevolent individual can destroy what should be a family's most joyful milestone. It serves as a reminder that our homes, no matter how carefully chosen or lovingly prepared, can never fully protect us from the darkness that exists in the world. For the Broaddus family, 657 Boulevard will always represent not the dream home they thought they were buying, but the place where they learned that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who never show their faces, who attack not with violence but with fear, and who can turn a family's greatest joy into their deepest nightmare without ever stepping foot inside their door. The windows of 657 Boulevard have new owners now, and the watcher has been silent for years. But somewhere in Westfield, or perhaps in another town entirely, there may be other eyes watching, other hands writing letters, other families about to discover that the American dream can become an American nightmare with the arrival of a single, anonymous envelope in their mailbox. The watcher's final words continue to echo in the minds of those who followed the case. I am pleased to know your names and the names now of the young blood you have brought to me. These words serve as a chilling reminder that in our interconnected world, privacy is an illusion, safety is never guaranteed, and sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones who remain forever hidden in plain sight.